So the topic that we're going to be discussing is the topic of Thanksgiving and Judaism. And hopefully everyone's aware that the most obvious connection between those two things is that the word for turkey in Hebrew is the word hodu, which means having gratitude and giving thanks. But that is not what I'm going to be talking about because that's just something really cute, but not a real thing. It's just a cute joke. What I actually want to discuss has two aspects to it. First of all, there's a halachic aspect, like a Jewish law aspect to the connection between Thanksgiving and Judaism, and then there's also a philosophical one. Connection or relationship between those two things. So the halachic aspect, the aspect related to Jewish law, is that there is a biblical mitzvah as part of what's meant to help us safeguard ourselves from assimilation and from forgetting what our unique mission is in this world. There's something called chukot hagoyim, meaning that if there is a religious pagan holiday that's being observed in some country, we aren't supposed to partake in that. So if you're visiting India and they have some sort of festival that maybe originally involved human sacrifice or whatever it is, but now the way they're celebrating it now seems pretty harmless, but the root of the holiday is in, I don't know, maybe worshiping the sun or something like that, or worshiping an animal. So we are supposed to not partake in that festival, even if we're not believing in anything. We're just joining the party. The Torah tells us that we're not supposed to do that. So that's why it's important to kind of take a look at the roots of the holiday before we decide whether this is something we want to be part of. So if you read some of the history, it's a pretty tame holiday as far as the roots are concerned. The most famous celebration of Thanksgiving is a 1621 pilgrim celebration in Plymouth Plantation, Massachusetts. And, it was one of these rare, not common enough occurrences where the pilgrims were having a feast together with the Native Americans, specifically the Wampanoag tribe, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, which I'm probably not. And they were celebrating the fact that they managed to get through a very harsh winter. So on the one hand, that's a totally tame kind of holiday. On the other hand, they were doing it from a Christian point of view, and technically speaking, Christianity is polytheism because of the Trinity, at least most forms of Christianity. So that gets a little bit tricky. So we have to kind of track the holiday throughout the ages and see how it got to its current state, and then see if it's actually a direct continuation of something very Christian, then it could be a little bit problematic. So just throughout the years until the Revolutionary War, there was sporadic celebrations, but it wasn't like something that happened every single year. It wasn't also any specific date. Every once in a while, people would have celebrations of Thanksgiving to thank God for lots of different things, which is great. In 1782, John Hanson, who is not famous for being the first president of the United States, because he was a president before the Constitution, so it wasn't actually a very powerful post. But he was kind of just like mostly like signing on things and whatever. He was under the Articles of the Confederation, and he declared that the fourth Thursday of every November was to be observed as a Thanksgiving. Several years later, President George Washington, much more famous, gave the first Thanksgiving proclamation, and he designated November 26th, 1789 as a day of Thanksgiving, and then he did that again in 1795. But it wasn't until 1863, in the middle of the Civil War, that a lady by the name of Sarah Josepha Hale convinced President Abraham Lincoln to actually make it as an official day and to have this something that actually happened every single year. And she was lobbying for this for many different reasons, one of them being that she wanted that to be a day off of work for everyone. And that is really when Thanksgiving, as we know it today, came to be. It wasn't really much of a day until then. And since that is the real origin of the Thanksgiving as we have it today, according to most rabbinical authorities, Thanksgiving is a totally fine holiday, because that makes it a civil holiday rather than a religious one, and it's totally fine. So that's just by way of introduction, kind of getting the halachic aspect of the relationship between Thanksgiving and Judaism aside. The emphasis of this class is actually going to be the philosophical relationship between the holiday of Thanksgiving and Judaism. So in order to discuss the relationship between anything and Judaism, we have to further explore what it means to be a Jew. So, I'm going to open the floor for anyone to say what they think or feel the meaning of being a Jew is. If you are uncomfortable with participating, that is totally fine. But if anyone wants to volunteer what they think a good definition for a Jew is, I'd be happy to hear. It's interesting, I saw an article talking about how it's very tricky to write articles about people who are Jewish, because if you write that he's a Jew, that's actually a derogatory term and it's not nice. So you have to constantly dance around that and say, so he's a Jewish person, he is Jewish, he observes Judaism, but writing he is a Jew is derogatory. On the other hand, writing that someone is a Christian is a compliment. So, that's a very unfortunate thing that happened throughout, years of anti-Semitism, that the term a Jew actually has a negative connotation, while the term a Christian is a very positive. But if nobody wants to share a personal definition of a Jew, I will give some of my own. For instance, some people feel that being Jewish is related to certain culinary preferences like bagels and cream cheese, or a certain type of humor that is very, I don't know what, not to my taste. But the actual root of the word, I don't know why the button, sorry, here, get it. Okay. The actual word for a Jew comes from the root of the word Judah. So in Hebrew, a Jew is a Yehudi, and that is the root of that word Yehudi is Yehuda. So Judah was one of Jacob's sons, and there were 12 tribes of Israel, and only one of them is Judah. So it's funny that the entire Jewish people is being called after that tribe of Judah. So historians will explain that the reason for this is because towards the end of the Second Temple period, actually towards the end of the First Temple period, there was the kingdom of Israel kind of split, and most of the tribes were exiled much earlier than the tribe of Judah. The kingdom of Judah was the part of Israel that stayed for the longest amount of time, and most of us today are descendants of the tribe of Judah. But it's very interesting to note, if you look in the Torah, to see when the first time anyone was called a Yehudi, because there's lots of different terms that Jewish people are called in the Torah. They're called an Ivri, they're called, a son of Jacob, or Yisrael, Israel. But the term Yehudi, Jew, appears for the first time in the book of Esther. And that is in reference to Mordechai in the book of Esther. And the Torah calls him a Jew right after saying that he is from the tribe of Benjamin. So that's a very funny thing. So that's not just like, generalizing like, okay, probably from the tribe of Judah, so let's call him a Jew. The Torah says he is from the tribe of Benjamin, and he is a Jew. So we see that there must be something about the tribe of Judah that's not necessarily true only about him, but can be a reference and can be a namesake for the entire Jewish people, at least in certain times. So the rabbis explained the reason why Mordechai is being called a Jew over there is because to admit in Hebrew is lehodot. So that's the root of the word Yehuda, is someone who admits, someone who recognizes. So since Mordechai was not willing to recognize anyone as God, but God himself, and this was a time when Haman had presented himself as a god, and he was forcing everyone else to bow down to him, and Mordechai wouldn't waver. So the fact that he wasn't wavering and he wouldn't recognize anyone but God as the true God is what gave him the name Yehudi. So Yehudi is from the root of the word Yehudi is to recognize. Someone earlier who was called a Yehudi was actually not Jewish, and also little known fact, and that is Basia, the daughter of Pharaoh. In the book of Exodus, Pharaoh, a kind of little side story that most people aren't aware of, is that Pharaoh's daughter decided to convert to Judaism, and she went down to the Nile to ritually bathe herself as part of her converting to Judaism, and that is where she saw Moses and saved him. So as she's going down, the term that Torah gives her is Yehudit. She's called a Jewess. And the reason why she's called a Jewess, the Talmud explains, is because she was rejecting all the deities that she grew up with, and she was recognizing the fact that God is the true God. So that recognition and that admitting to the fact that there's only one God is what gave her the term Yehudi. So we see the same kind of thing, that Jew is about recognizing and admitting. But it's interesting if we look at the namesake of Yehudi, Judah himself. The reason why his mother decided to call him Yehuda was because she had understood that every single one of Jacob's wives was going to have 3 children. That was a certain calculation that she made. And then Judah was the 4th child. So she was overwhelmed with gratitude. And she said, wow, I'm so grateful. And that is why she called Judah Judah, is out of gratitude, because the word lehodot in Hebrew also means to be grateful. So she had actually called Yehuda or Judah his name based on the word for gratefulness. So it's funny that the original Yehuda was about gratefulness, but then from then on, his name is used as recognition and admittance. So hopefully we'll see that those two things come together in a very strong way. So we're just going to take a side step from that, and we'll get right back to it. And I want to point out something very, very fascinating. So Moshe was given the call of duty to save the Jewish people from Egypt. And the way he did this was, God gave him, okay, this is your new mission. You're going to save the Jewish people. It's going to be amazing. And Moses is like, okay, what's the first thing you need to do? God said, okay, the first thing is the plague of blood. And the way we're going to do the plague of blood is we're going to take a stick and we're going to hit the Nile, and it'll turn into blood. And Moses is like, okay, great, let's do it. And God says, no, I want Aaron to do it, not you. And a similar thing happened in the plague of lice, where God said that Aaron should be the one to hit the earth and bring out the lice, and not Moses. And the reason for this is because that the Nile was where Moses' life was saved. As he was floating on the Nile, he was saved from Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's daughter found him and adopted him and saved his life. So out of gratitude to the Nile, Moses was told that he shouldn't hit it. And that was the same thing with the earth. When Moses saw an Egyptian trying to kill a Jew, Moses killed the Egyptian, and then he knew he would be in terrible trouble if anyone found out, so he quickly buried the Egyptian under the earth. And the fact that the earth saved his life there by covering the Egyptian was the reason why Moses was supposed to not be ungrateful and not hit the earth or the water. And it's beautiful. It makes a lot of sense, unless you think about the fact that the water obviously has no feelings. And even if the water did, the earth definitely doesn't have any feelings. So why is Moses being told to be sensitive about inanimate objects? And there's just before we answer that, another interesting story in the Talmud is that, mostly we see people having very good marriages in the Talmud, but unfortunately there is a rabbi by the name of Rav Chia who, without blaming anyone, his wife would really torture him emotionally whenever she'd see him. She would taunt him and make fun of him and really make his life very, very miserable. And Rav Chia had an interesting custom. Whenever he would see something nice in the market, he would buy it and he would wrap it up in order to give it as a gift to his wife. And his wife's treatment of him was very, very famous because she would use any opportunity to humiliate him in public and taunt him and whatever it was. So his students would ask him, okay, so you treat her nicely, whatever, but this is very extreme. You go out of your way to find her nice gifts and wrap them up. Okay, just give up already. You've been trying to do this for 20 years and it hasn't helped. Give up. And Rav Chia explained that the reason why he's doing it is because he has so much appreciation for the fact that she's raising his children. She's a great mother to his children. And that is why he feels like he needs to buy her lots of gifts. But it's very obvious that the reason why she was raising his children so well was not because of him, but despite him. If she didn't care about her children, she would actually raise them terribly just to spite Rav Chia. And the reason she was raising them so nicely was because they were her children also, and she cared about them. So this was something that she was doing that was benefiting Rav Chia, but she wasn't doing it at all for him. She was doing it to spite him. And yet he felt the need to constantly show his gratitude, constantly buy her things. And the reason for that is because the importance of him recognizing the good that he's getting was never about whether she was doing something unnecessary or going out of her way to help him. It wasn't really about her, it was about himself. It's very important for him to express gratitude for good that's being done to him. Whether it's being done to help him or despite him, it doesn't really make a difference. It's like the importance of thanking a bus driver who just drove you to work, because it doesn't matter that the bus driver is getting a salary at the end of the day and that's the only reason why he's doing it. In the end of the day, if the bus driver did something to help you and you've benefited from him, the right thing to do is to go up to him and express that gratitude. And it's not really about helping the bus driver and showing and giving him that nice feeling. That's also a very good thing. It's a very good thing to give bus drivers a nice feeling about the work that they're doing so they don't feel burnt out. But it's even more important to do stuff like that for ourselves in order for our personal sensitivities, to make sure that we constantly recognize the good that's being done for us and show our appreciation for it. And that is exactly what God was telling Moses. God was telling Moses, this is the perfect example. The Nile doesn't care whether you hit it or not. But for your own personal self-development, it's very important that you don't do acts that are seemingly ungrateful to something that benefited you, because that's going to cloud your vision and make you unable to constantly appreciate the good that you've received through the medium called the Nile or the earth. And that is what that's about. So there's really two different levels of gratitude. One level of gratitude is if someone goes out of their way to do something good for you, you have to thank them for that. But another and more basic and even more important level of gratitude is appreciating what you have and expressing it, and showing that appreciation. And that is really showing appreciation in Hebrew. The word for showing appreciation is hakarat hatov, which really literally means recognition of the good. Because what's more important than expressing the recognition, what's much more basic than that is actually recognizing the good that we have. And a good friend of mine had an uncle who, unfortunately, during the first Intifada in Israel, was in a cafe where a suicide bomber came in and blew himself up, and many people were very injured, including my friend's uncle, who lost one of his limbs. It was a terrible thing. And a group of Americans who were injured in different terrorist attacks in the Second Intifada, banded together and sued the Palestinian Authority in the United States courts for all the incitement to violence and hate that had been going on in the Palestinian school system. And they were able to show that there was a direct connection between these acts of violence and acts of murder and the constant incitement in Palestinian media and in Palestinian education. And it was a many-year process, but eventually, a few years ago, they won the court case, and the United States had frozen Palestinian assets of the Palestinian Authority in the United States, and they distributed the money to all the victims that had filed the lawsuit. And this uncle of my friend received many hundreds of thousands of dollars as compensation for the limb that he had lost, and he basically became, if not almost, then actually a millionaire through this terrorist attack. And my friend was talking to him about it, and he said, there's no doubt in my mind that it was totally not worth it. It's very nice that I got hundreds of thousands of dollars, but that can't give me my limb back, and nothing can give me my limb back, and my life will never be the same, and it was totally not worth it. And my friend turned to me and he said, do you realize how many of those limbs we have? I mean, that's wild. This was one limb that the guy lost, and and close to $1 million would not even come close to being a proper compensation. And we have all the limbs necessary. We have all our limbs, every single one of them. We're like basically walking around billionaires. When was the last time anyone felt like they were walking around billionaires just because they weren't missing any limbs? And there's a few reasons why we don't walk around like billionaires. And one of them is because we take it for granted. Ever since we were born, we had limbs. We're very used to having limbs, myself included. And another one is that we expect that we will always have limbs. We never think we're going to ever lose those limbs. Like if you watch documentaries of soldiers on D-Day as they're talking about what they felt, people ask them like, oh, what did you feel when you were in the amphibious assault as you were about to storm the beaches of Normandy, where it was almost 100% chances of not surviving, if not the first few minutes, then the first few hours or days. And those few soldiers that survived said it was totally, we were very nervous, but we had no doubt that nothing would happen to us. Things could have happened to people around us, but not to us, because we just take our lives for granted. We assume that just like everything was fine yesterday, everything will be fine today. But if only we were able to notice what we have and appreciate what we have, then we'd really feel like millionaires. I personally had a very high prescription on my glasses, and it was I could barely see without glasses, and I got laser surgery. And right after the laser surgery, I remember driving home, and the amount of pleasure I got just from being able to read. I wasn't actually driving the car, thank God. Someone else was driving the car. But looking around and being able to see with my own eyes, being able to read out a license plate on a car next to me was such an exhilarating feeling. I really felt like a millionaire. I just got two eyes that I'm able to see, and it's unbelievable. And I really walked around for the next few weeks feeling like $1 million. Eventually it went down to $500,000, then $100,000, $10,000. Now I feel about $3 or $4. But the reason is that we just get very used to everything we have, and we stop appreciating it. And the most important part of appreciating and is recognizing the good that we have. And that is what Yehuda is all about. Yehuda is admitting, it's recognizing, and it's being grateful, because the main component of being grateful is first recognizing the good that we have and then expressing it. And the reason why Yehuda was called Yehuda was because Leah had 3 kids that were amazing and beautiful children. But the true gratefulness came when the 4th one came, because she wasn't expecting it. She didn't take the 4th one for granted. And that's when she really appreciated all of her kids, because that helped her see like, oh my gosh, look, a kid. I didn't expect a kid, and here I have a kid. And I'm not suggesting that tomorrow morning everyone should walk around feeling like $1 million just because you heard someone tell you that you should feel like $1 million. What you should do is it's an exercise. It's a lifetime experience of working on appreciating everything that we have. And that is at the core of our mission as Jews, is to recognize, to admit, and to appreciate the life that we have, everything we have. You know, if we were born a few hundred years ago, we wouldn't have good insulation, we wouldn't have heating, we wouldn't have all the things that you need to survive in Chicago, or anywhere. And we definitely wouldn't have the comforts of, you know, modern day beds, and, you know, we don't sleep on straw, we're not covered in lice. All these things that we have that a few hundred years ago made us be considered trillionaires, today is just considered normal, and we don't appreciate it. Had we lived a few hundred years ago, we would have assumed that living today would have been this exhilarating feeling of appreciation and gratitude. And our mission as Jews is to actually try our best to do that. And the way we're supposed to do that, just one example of how we're supposed to live our lives as Jews in that way, is every single morning, first of all, waking up and saying, wow, thank you, God, for giving us another day. Starting off your day like that already makes the world of a difference, because it's an entire different mindset for how you have your day. But it actually gets even more detailed like that. And something called the Birkat HaShachar, the morning blessings, are exactly an exercise exactly on that. You know, we say, thank you, God, for making us able to see. We open our eyes, we're able to see, wow, that's amazing. You know, we're able to get dressed, we have clothes, there's a blessing for that. We're able to walk around, our muscles are working, our legs are working, our limbs are working. Every one of those things have a blessing. Everything we take for granted, we're suddenly told to say thank you for. And that is supposed to help us get an entirely different mindset. So recommendation would be to maybe find one of those blessings that speaks to you, or maybe in your own language, however it may be, start off your day appreciating one thing that you take for granted, and hopefully that'll help us recognizing all the amazing things that we have in life. And it is a sure and true path to happiness, though it's a lengthy path. It's not a shortcut. It's something that takes a lifetime of appreciating and fine-tuning the appreciation. And it sounds very cliche, but truly, Thanksgiving is not supposed to be once a year kind of thing. In Judaism, Thanksgiving is supposed to be every single day. That's not to say that having a nice time with your family is nothing wrong with that, and appreciating the fact that we live in a free country where the Jewish people are allowed to prosper is, you know, there's a lot of room for appreciation for that. But it's also very good to remember that our calling as Jews is to recognize and appreciate everything in our lives every single day, to the best of our ability. That is the conclusion of the class. Thank you so much for joining. And if anyone has any questions, I'd love to hear.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
you.
Questions, comments, stories, jokes?
What were the two things at the beginning you said, like halachically, and then what did you say?
I was just saying the two points that I wanted to address in the class are the halachic aspect, meaning halachic is like the Jewish law aspect of observing the holiday, which is fine. According to most rabbis, it's totally fine. It's a civil holiday. Even though originally it had started as a very Christian thing, but it's not, and people like to think of it as a direct continuation of the Christian thing. It's not really. There were large gaps in between.
Right.
And it's really a civil holiday, which is totally fine.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And everyone's welcome to sign off or ask questions.
A question about Birkat HaShachar.
Yes.
Is there any way like to study them in detail? What do they mean? I've been saying them every morning and I want to know more. You know, all the explanations and really what am I saying, everything.
Makes sense. I can try to find you good materials on that. In the meantime, also, what's more important than analyzing the text is analyzing your life and
Yeah.
appreciating, just you doing personal exercises of like appreciating the fact that you can use your fingers to hold a cup, and like all the motor skills that involves. If you speak to an occupational therapist about, the different stages until you're able to put every finger in the proper place in order to properly balance everything, and so I think that would be even more powerful than analyzing the texts of the blessing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question, Rabbi Marcus.
Hi, Natasha. I didn't notice you were there. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. So my question is, do you think that something bad has to happen to us for us to appreciate our lives?
Practically or theoretically?
Both.
Often practically, yes. Theoretically, and hopefully also practically, no. Meaning that's the point of this exercise, is to try to make sure that nothing bad needs to happen to us in order to appreciate. And what some people need to do, because the only way for them to appreciate is for something bad to happen, is some people need to not experience it themselves, but some people have the habit of going into hospitals and regaining their appreciation through that. And if that's the only thing that works for them, then that's great. But it's a much more positive approach to try to just appreciate what we have without needing to have the contrast. You can even have imaginary contrasts, like picturing yourself living a few hundred years ago, and closing your eyes, picturing yourself with everything that living a few hundred years ago entailed, and then opening your eyes and living your life and reappreciating your nice clean sheets on your bed and your beautiful apartment and the hygiene quality of the food that you're eating, whatever it is, So,
or sometimes, if I could share something, when I live in downtown Chicago, you see people, you see things that are sometimes not very pleasant, or people that are sick or anything. So when you see them, then you think, thank you God for for everything that I have,
right.
Yeah. Just extra note.
Yeah. Can I say something on that note? Can I mention something?
Sure.
Because I actually feel a bit guilty. I feel guilty that I feel like I have to see other people suffer in order for me to appreciate my life. I feel as though when I'm the happiest, it's when I'm working with people who are suffering severely. And that makes me feel guilty, because it makes me feel like I can't have a sense of appreciation if I don't see human beings suffering.
Oh, wow.
Right. There's a flip side of looking at that, and that is people who work with people who have terrible lives, and it doesn't make them happy. It means they don't appreciate the terrible things that these people are going through. They don't care. If you actually didn't care, then it wouldn't make your life better. You wouldn't feel enriched in your personal life if you didn't care. So it's actually the fact that you're caring for these people and you appreciate how terrible what they're going through is, that you're able to appreciate that contrast. So I don't think you should feel guilty about it. Most people walk by beggars and their life doesn't feel better because they don't care about people. And what you're saying is that you see people suffering and you care, and then you're able to concentrate on your personal life. So I think that's actually an appreciation for the terrible things people are going through and how hard it is for them. And I don't think that's called like being happy, not happy for their misery. You're appreciating the fact that you aren't grounds for guilt.
Yeah.
Also, if you didn't appreciate how much they're suffering, you wouldn't try to help them. And the fact that you feel their suffering, and you appreciate your life so much better when you see them, that's what drives you to go and help them in a way that no one else would. Exactly. And that's big for them. You're not their family relative necessarily. You're not someone they know, or you're a person coming from outside to help.
Right. Beautiful. Thank you, Natalie.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need to sign this because my Zoom has a 40-minute limit, so it's about to sign us off.
Okay.
But thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
And take care and have great happy lives.
Thank you. Will we see you next Wednesday?
Yes.
Okay. Great. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much. Happy holidays.
Happy
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.